passion and pageantry of college football lives here. This is the Paul Finebaum Show, Hour 4 podcast.
This might be college football heaven.
Hour has arrived, and we'll talk to the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide in just a few minutes. Biggest basketball game of the year is straight ahead tomorrow. Oats will join us shortly. How about Daniel in Columbus? So hello, Daniel.
Good evening, Paul. Hope you're having a great day.
We are. Thank you.
I wanted to respond to a couple things. You're a fan that was talking about the SEC fans being the greatest and having the big party. You know, the only thing I disagree with, I think you're going to find rabid fans at a Division III college sometimes. So you're always going to find that. I will credit you, though, because I think the difference is you give fans a great mouthpiece to really talk their piece and to have a bunch of callers who are committed to you as well as newbies. I think that's fantastic. I hope you never give that up and you keep going, because I just don't see that in other conferences or other places. And I love hearing you talk and hearing you argue and hearing you talk about all kinds of things. So,
Daniel,
so
let me explain one
that.
thing, because
Yeah.
The evolution of this show on the SEC network is this. We were the first show, we were the first people hired, and the reason was because the people at the SEC and ESPN really believed that fans deserved a voice. And I don't think there is anything, any other show like this, because I believe in the fans. I don't believe my opinion is that important, but I believe collectively the fans' opinions matter most. So I hope you're right. I hope we can continue doing this for a long time.
I will say this, you know, I'm thinking way back when Mike and Mike first started having their show, they had a lot of call-in.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think what happens is they get bigger and bigger, the guests get bigger, and then after a while there's no call-in. It's just guests. And I did want to tell you one
Daniel,
enjoyable story
I was
about
with
the
Tony
Tennessee game.
Kornheiser, who's done talk radio a lot, as you know. And he
Yeah.
called me aside. We were at his restaurant, and he said, I can't use the language, but he said, why do you take these blanking calls? And I said, because that's what we do. I mean, guys like that, and Tony's a great commentator, and I love the guy, but when you're in a big city like Washington or New York or Boston, they tend to shy away from the calls, where we've been able to do this. It was a local show, as you know, and I think the show still feels local, and I think that's the difference between this and Mike and Cal Hurd and Rome and Greenberg and all these other shows.
Well, I got to tell you at least one good story that you'll enjoy. And the last time I called you, you were dissing Columbus a little bit. And I was telling you how great Columbus was, if you remember this a long time ago. But I will say this. I went to the Ohio State-Tennessee game at Ohio State, and I was shocked. First thing, I was angry because a lot of season ticket holders that sit around me, somehow their tickets went to Tennessee fans. That's the first thing that bothered me. And I'll give Tennessee credit. They travel well. They were there in mass for sure. So I had Tennessee fans on my right side. I had a group of Tennessee fans behind me. I had some in front of me. And so I noticed that this woman who's next to me, she even worked in a similar area that I do. So we had some things in common, but she would not talk to me. And she was trying to out-yell me, which she could not do, by the way. But she was trying. So she was even yelling when their team had the ball, which I try never to do. But she was yelling a lot. And then after a while, she was clapping extra loud. And I noticed when she was clapping, she was sort of, you know, you're kind of scrunched together. You're standing the whole game. Her elbows are starting to hit me on the side a little bit. So, you know, I'm not saying anything to her. I stepped up on the bleachers in front of me just to kind of clear that a little bit so I could still cheer and stuff like that. And as I'm up there, I get a tap on the shoulder. 3 fans behind me from Tennessee. One guy who was, you know, good-sized guy, he says, hey, sir, you know, you're in my way. Can you please step down? So I got to tell you, imagine yourself in an Alabama game and someone from Ohio State says that to you. So I had so many things go through my head. First thing I wanted to say to him, I wanted to turn around to him, get my face in his face and say, you know what, buddy, it's my house. But I did not. And I thought later, a better thing to say would have been, go ahead, make my day. But I did not. Or I could have said, you can do anything you want, but ask yourself one question. Do you feel lucky? But I didn't. Instead, I told him, I said, well, I'm getting a couple of elbows here. And he was very nice. He said, oh, I understand totally. And I got down. It turned out the guy actually worked in Cincinnati for Medtronic. And it turned out that he went to Wabash College in Indiana. I think he had some grad school ties to Tennessee and become a Tennessee fan. So I felt like I was a very well-behaved, restrained fan. I figured you'd like that.
That is a great story. Hey, Daniel, thanks for sharing that, and don't be a stranger. Appreciate it very, very much. Sketch is in Prattville, Alabama.
Hey, Paul. So thankful for you having me on.
Thank you very much.
I've been hearing about the Bama punt game, and I was a 12-year-old kid at that game.
Really?
Me and my buddy, we were down on about the 35-yard line, and back then, the big thing were those big old felt cowboy hats. It just had a simple A on the front. Nobody had gotten good about that. And when they kicked the first one, my hat flew down about 2 sections, and a little bit of Coca-Cola came down, and I went down there and got my hat. By the time I got back then there was a lot more bourbon, I think, snuck in up there in Birmingham to those games. There was nowhere to tailgate. And when they kicked that second one, it showered bourbon. And I showered some Coca-Cola too, but here's a 12-year-old kid running around, and you'd have thought we were the town drunks. And back then the thing to do was to run down to the where the players went out and pull chin straps off their helmets and then compare. And we went down to the Alabama. I was an Auburn fan. And about the first one I went to pull, this guy looked at me like, do it and die. So I backed out. But that was just my big time there. Something I'll never forget, riding back on the bus to the hotels. And it was just a big story.
No, Sketch, I know that the kick six has overshadowed that in the 85 game, but I don't think there's ever been a set of circumstances in college football history that can replicate that, especially, if you had 2 losing teams, it would be one thing, but literally the national championship hung in the balance.
And it happened so long ago that I've heard about it, longer than any other Auburn thing that you could hear about. So every time you see that little snippet on TV, I think, well, I was there. I was also there for the kick six when in 2010 with my son, and I told him, I was at that kick Bama kick, and then I'm at the kick six. What's next?
By the way, we saw the Gravediggers. We saw the 4 overtime game. There have been some pretty remarkable games. Hey, thank you very much for the call. Really nice of you to be with us. So let's continue. David is in Arizona. Hello, David. Go right ahead.
Hey, Paul. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for picking up my call today.
You bet.
I really just wanted to make a couple comments here. They're both related. I'm going to end with Auburn basketball because I know you're going to have the Alabama coach on here shortly. In all seriousness, Paul, Brad got smoked by Ari, and I would be one of those that agrees that in a way you honestly do your audience a disservice. And I'm not going to try to guess as to why, but when we lose in life, as you know, it's a loss and it's coping. Really, if you could help your audience cope before next season with the reality of today's college football, and what I mean by that is my hope for the entire SEC, all the SEC teams, at a minimum, just win the games that you're favored to win. If the so-called super, really great, good teams just did that, there would be no question as to whether or not they made the playoff. And I know you like to beat up on Indiana, and that's fine. But what Indiana did do that some of these SEC teams did not do was win games that they should, but then they also won games they shouldn't. They were an underdog half the season last year. And not only did they win, Paul, you would know this by looking up their, as you call their high school schedule, they blew everyone out. And that includes Nebraska, 56-0. In comparables to SEC teams like Georgia, they actually performed on the scoreboard equally, if not better. It's unfair to pick on the small guy. Like, Indiana is the most losing college football team in the history of college football. If there's a team that understands what it means to win, it's them. And they didn't take anything for granted. They came out there and just beat the crap out of everyone they should have, and an entire half a season they shouldn't. And then they got beat by the number 1 and 2 teams. So my hope for Alabama, South Carolina, especially Ole Miss, who lost to Kentucky at home. Okay, that's no one should be arguing Ole Miss. I'm sorry. If you're a championship caliber team, you don't lose at home to an unranked team. And so this brings up basketball because the SEC is killing it this year. I think everyone respects that and honors that. It's been a long time coming for the SEC, so at least me personally, I hope it works out well. But let's talk Auburn real quick. They are the oldest basketball team in the history of college basketball, average age. They should win. You talk about playing high school teams. Their average age is almost 24 years old. These are grown men playing mostly, 18 to 21-year-old kids. And so if Auburn does not win this year, then that's exactly the point. The teams that should win. And if they don't, it's very difficult to listen day in and day out to your show, Paul, honestly, to hear fans griping about their underachieving paper Tigers. And I think we're all down
David,
with
I hate to interrupt, but
SEC.
we really do need to get to a break here because of our guests waiting in a few minutes. But
Yeah.
Thank you for the call. I want to say one thing, and what you said, though, David, is why Indiana got in, because we all gave them credit for being a lovable loser and then beating a bunch of average to mediocre teams by a lot. Their non-conference schedule was still shameful, and Indiana has not really changed that. They're going to do the same thing. They opened with Old Dominion. They play Kennesaw State in Indiana State. Meanwhile, the University of Texas opens the season at Ohio State. We'll take a short break.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Cat Daddy is next.
Big Paul, I was going to tell you, you're looking good and sounding good, but I was afraid Bash would call in and be talking with some of that Rocky Mountain high marijuana he'd be smoking. But anyway,
he must be doing something today. We have not heard from the pothead from Bash yet.
Well, that ain't bothering me. What I wanted to call you about today was, you remember the first time I called you was when South Carolina entered the SEC.
Right.
And you had some not glorious remarks about us entering the conference. Do you remember that?
I think I called. I was pretty rough on the Cox.
Well, sir, a lot of folks are coming in the liquor store now, and they've changed your mind because that was the first time they come in. They were going, man, that Finebaum, he ain't no good, and he ain't no good. Now they're all coming in. They're going, Finebaum's a pretty fair fellow. He's pretty fair.
That's great.
He's articulate about what he's doing, and that's really changed the last few years in Finebaum. And I just wanted to know, and that's probably because of your knowledge of the game. But there's one question I have to ask you tonight. With all that said, and people looking different at you here in South Carolina, do you think our Gamecocks will ever win a national championship against Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, now Texas? What's your take on that?
Well, I think the Gamecocks are in a position. I mean, that team we saw at the end of last season could have easily competed for a national championship. So I think the answer is yes. Now,
you honestly believe that? Because you're going to excite a lot of people here in South Carolina and other states tonight.
It is not an exaggeration to say that South Carolina team we saw at the end of the year was good enough to compete with anyone. I mean, that was a really great team. You had the quarterback. I think the key is getting into the playoffs, which certainly South Carolina can do now. They have mastered the one thing I never thought they could be able to master, and that's beating Clemson.
Mr. Finebaum, I'm going to tell you what. You have excited everybody here in South Carolina. We are fired up. Thank you, sir, for all you've done.
Okay, Daddy, thank you very much. And I will be announcing my candidacy for the governorship of South Carolina soon. Actually, not far from South Carolina. That might be an easier journey. Sparks is up next. Hello, Sparks.
Hey, Paul, how's it going?
What's up, my man?
Waiting for the throwdown in T-Town tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, about the Bama punt. Auburn took the opening kickoff, drove down, kicked a 39-yard field goal, and Alabama scored 16 unanswered points. They missed extra point score. But Auburn had 98 yards total offense.
That's amazing.
That punter just fell down. Oh, and that Auburn guy a while ago said about the kick six, he said 2010. He's wrong. It was 2013.
Right.
And I heard the Canadian talk about Miro. And I got to thinking, do you think what Jalen Hurts has done and been doing will have an effect where Miro may be gaining draft stock?
I know you're coming from this part. I don't think there's a direct correlation. I think NFL scouts are too mercenary. They're going to simply look at what Milroe has done, what he's capable of doing, and really what he does in the combines and all the things that he'll be dealing with. Gary is up next in Fayetteville. Gary, go right ahead.
Yeah, I've been listening to you probably over 20 years. What a pleasure it is, and I want to say thank you for taking my call, Paul.
Thank you.
And having spent 10 years in the Marines, 10 years in the Army with the 82nd, I'm still nervous talking to you, but I just want to go over
listen, what you have done in the 82nd and all your other service, that should be a piece of cake compared to being on this show.
Well, it still is, no. But I just want to say my late brother died in his early 50s from colon cancer. I just want to say, had he gotten a colonoscopy, probably when he was age 50, he'd still be with us. But to touch on Alabama, he took me to a game there when they played Kentucky. I want to say Kyle Macy was there, and what a great game. And still a little bit nervous, but I just want to say that's part of my bucket list talking with you, Paul. I've been listening to your show probably close to 30 years, and what a great man you are and just a beautiful host. Want to wish you, hope it's not too doom and gloom being Valentine's Day, but what a pleasure it was talking with you.
Gary, it was my pleasure, and I am in awe of what you have done, and I appreciate you mentioning your brother because I'm as guilty as the next person. My doctor told me not that long ago, same thing that you just mentioned, and we all just say we'll do it some other time, and it's important to remember, and I'm glad you followed up our friend a minute ago who is struggling with his colonoscopy coming up.
One last thing, Paul. My wife's a retired registered nurse, and I told her this. When I got my colonoscopy in July, they removed like 11 polyps, and I told her, had I not gotten a colonoscopy, she probably would have lost me to the same thing. One other thing, Ken Stabler came down to Alabama. He would come to Marion Military Institute. I was there for a while, and my two other brothers were there. And, of course, he had passed away also associated with colon cancer. And I'll leave it at that.
Well,
Thank
I
you,
did
Paul.
not realize that's what ended up getting Kenny. No, I remember that camp at Marion. I went down there one day, and that was quite an event. Hey, thank you so much. You be well. Let's talk again soon. We head to the break. We are going to pause here from the calls as we say hello to Nate Oats from the University of Alabama.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Television.
All right.
I heard it there. Coach, I don't know if you even heard my question, but thank you for joining us. Appreciate it very much. And I was just trying to get you to talk a little bit about the noise that you have to deal with, other than the noise on the court tomorrow. What's it been like all week?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been lots of people want to talk about the matchup. Some of it's it's all good because there's a lot of, notoriety brought around the game, the program, SEC basketball, first time ever in SEC history that 1 versus 2 is going on. So it's all great. It's just, you got to filter through it. I got to be able to still coach the game and lock into prepping for the game. It's like, you don't want to turn down opportunities to promote the game of basketball, SEC basketball, Alabama basketball, but I also got to make sure our team's ready to go, and I'm ready to go as a coach.
Coach, I know that there's a lot of time, and you're doing it right now, and we appreciate it, but you had a road game the other night. It's a long trip back, but it's still a little bit of time. What's the most difficult thing? Is it just time away, concentration away? I mean, you're certainly one of the great X's and O's coaches, analytical coaches. What is it that gets in the way of getting ready for the game?
Yeah, it's obviously being on the road. We have back-to-back road games, stayed out, Arkansas, Texas. You're a little tired, get in super late. But, I thought Wednesday was pretty productive. We tried not to have any interviews and stuff Wednesday. Thursday, the hay's out in the barn by now, which is why I got no problem doing an interview with you. I love talking to you anyway. So, by Friday night, it's just tidying up a couple little things, looking practice video, how it looked. But, it's everybody requesting because they want to get their stories out. They need a quote from the head coach. Well, they want their stories out on Wednesday or Thursday. I'm like, no. First, there's people that were calling us Monday, Tuesday, on the right big side. Like, you mind if I get through the Texas game first? Because they're pretty good too. They got a kid that's probably going top 5 in the draft. Like if we lose this Texas one, it's going to damper the whole mood to the Saturday game. So let's not talk about anything to do with Auburn until we get through Texas. If we're fortunate enough to get through that, and we still have 1-2 tied for first place in the SEC, now let's decide who's important to talk to, what we have time for, and still making sure we got a proper game plan put in here.
And you're talking about what you have to deal with, which is a great deal. I know your players are dealing with different things. How do you protect them? Because I'm sure everybody wants to talk to them about this game. Everyone's probably asking tickets. The usual things that normally are not as pressing as they are today.
Yeah, I'm sure plenty of them have everyone in their, aunt, cousin, everybody needs a ticket to the game. The good thing for us is we went to the Final Four last year, and that's a distraction. I think we did a pretty good job keeping our guys from being distracted as we went through that. So they've had a little bit of experience with that. But, there's a tension. You got to deal with tickets. You got to deal with family coming. You got to deal with, now in the day of NIL, it's a great opportunity to be out there making some NIL money, but every minute you're out there making some NIL money, you're probably not prepping for the game like you ought to be. So, you can't prep for the game 24 hours a day. So it's being disciplined with how you use your time, what you use it for, and making sure you keep the main thing the main thing. And, I'm a 50-year-old man that if I got issues with it, I'm sure there are 20-year-old young men that got some issues with it too.
And Coach, I don't want to take anything away because, the hype is self-explanatory. You'll be on TV in the morning and you'll be being followed by everyone. But ultimately, and this because you just went to the Final Four, but how do you approach this game with your team saying, listen, let's go out there and win the game? And I don't think you really want to say it's not the end of the world because it feels like the end of the world based on what we're all hearing. So how do you put it into perspective?
Yeah, I've explained to our guys in the games that maybe are not maybe, they're definitely a lot less hyped than this game. A win's a win and a loss is a loss in SEC play. We're trying to win. We've got goals. Winning the SEC regular season championship, one of them. Well, a win's a win, whether it's Texas, Arkansas, like we were just fortunate enough to win on the road, or Auburn at home. But you gotta rattle up wins, and whether it's Auburn, the big thing with this is we're tied with Auburn, so a win for us would be a loss for them and, give us a full game separation. So, it's obviously big, and this one would go a long ways in NCAA seeding tournament because That's another goal of ours, is trying to win that championship. So, this one carries a little more weight probably in the committee's mind, but we're trying to win an SEC regular season championship. So when this game's said and done, and we've got Missouri next week, a Missouri win or loss is equal to an Auburn win or loss in the SEC standings. So we've got to be ready to play every single game out.
You referenced the Final Four, and listen, everybody knows what you've accomplished at Alabama. Do all of those experiences play into this? And I know that it's the night before the game. You probably don't do a whole lot differently, but how much does the past help you in the present?
And I definitely think it helps, because the Final Four is the biggest. It's the biggest thing in college basketball, and it's one of the biggest sporting events in all of the entire world, to be honest with you. So the amount of media attention and the amount of possible distractions that you have in that particular game, this game's big. 1 versus 2, it hasn't happened in a long time. College basketball, the regular season, it's never happened in the SEC. It's rarely happened within the same state. This is big, and there's a lot of distractions. It's not to the level of the Final Four. So everybody that was on our team last year, including the staff, understands how you can be distracted, that we need to, be disciplined in our time. All the way down. Our SID has been through it. I've been through it. Administration's been through it. Most of the assistants, I was fortunate enough to bring back most of our staff from last year. So, yeah, I think you can learn from that type of thing in the past. You can learn from, our players, Grant, Sears, some of these guys that, Jaron Stevenson, best game of his career in the Elite Eight game to send us to the Final Four. Some of these guys, there's some confidence that comes from performing well in big games, whether it's to send us to the Final Four or in the Final Four. Grant Nelson showed up big in that Carolina game, in the Final Four. I think some guys have some confidence that they played well in big games. This is a big game, and it's as big as it is. It's not as big as the Final Four game we played against UConn. So some of our guys have been in some big games and can get a little bit of confidence going from that.
I know one thing that led you to Alabama, Coach Oats, is Alabama really does have a great basketball tradition. It's ebbed and flowed, but it's richer than I think maybe the average person where you were in Detroit or Buffalo gives it credit. But still, when you think about the big picture of Auburn having been to a Final Four, Alabama, the SEC, this moment in time, I know there's not a lot of time to reflect, but you would have to admit it's fairly unique, wouldn't you?
Oh, very unique. And you're right. Alabama had a lot more tradition. It had been a little longer ago, Sam Newton, Wimp Sanderson, some of that. They were second in the SEC in wins, which, it's hard to be first because you got Kentucky in the SEC. So, Alabama's got really good tradition. Auburn maybe didn't have quite as good a tradition, but, Coach Pearl took them to a Final Four before I ever got here and coached the game. So now you've got two of the best, and the last two Final Fours for anybody in the SEC have been the one Auburn went to and then us last year. So, I think it's great for the state of Alabama, what Coach Pearl's done and now what we've been able to do at Alabama. But it's big for the SEC. It's big for college basketball in general to have this huge rivalry, and now it ends up being 1 versus 2, and everybody's going to be able to see it. And I think it's great for our fan base. Shoot, I'm excited. I'm a basketball fan before I was ever a basketball coach. I remember watching all kinds of college basketball games as a kid. I saved my paper route money up to buy a TV because everybody in my family wasn't as excited to watch college basketball games every single night of the week as I was. So I still remember saving all my money up, going and buying a TV to put in my room that we ran cable to. I'm a huge fan, so obviously I can't be a fan tomorrow, but this is exciting for me as a college basketball fan that I get to participate in a game that's this big.
Well, Coach, I'll let you get ready for the game, but thank you for making time for us always. And to put it mildly, we'll all be watching tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I've got my 7th grade daughter's soccer game tonight before I get to the big game. So wish Brielle good luck in her soccer game tonight. I'm about to walk into here, Paul. So we'll see after the game tomorrow.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Coach. Hope she pulls out a victory tonight as well. Good luck. Well, thank you very much, Nate Oats, joining us from Tuscaloosa, going to a soccer game before the biggest Alabama regular season basketball game ever. We'll take a short break.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.